It's fair to say that the 2016 election in New York was a bit of a shit show. I don't think that's an understatement at all, especially if you're a Sanders supporter. Over 200,000 people were thrown off the rolls just before the election. Even beyond the people being thrown off the rolls, which was considered a crime by New York law and by federal law without any consequence, there was also this issue of the vote tally in coordination with the exit votes. But from the standpoint of Sanders and his supporters, one of the most onerous that was institutional had to do with when people in New York had to register to vote as a Democrat in comparison to when they actually voted. Meaning it was almost like a half of year, if not longer, beforehand. I believe it was October 11th, and the people didn't vote until April, I believe. So you can imagine that there are all sorts of people who weren't even fully engaged in the political process, who wanted to vote for Sanders, who might have been an independent and won't necessarily a Democrat, that did not get to vote for Sanders because of the way New York's voting registration law was and the level of people that were excluded from that process. One of Sanders' big concessions was, or one of his big points, policy objectives. New York needs to change its laws. And what do you know? Cuomo, a bill that was languishing on his desk with people asking him, are you going to sign it? Are you going to sign it? Are you going to sign it? It even calls from Sanders to Tom Perez saying, will there be consequences if you don't sign this? Meaning the Democratic Party needed to institute some level of consequences if Cuomo doesn't sign this particular bill extending the deadline for registration. Sanders gets his wish. Cuomo has just signed the bill extending New York's registration. Good. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Might as well say Soapbox After Dark because it is dark outside my window. Guys, if you dig this content and you find yourself coming back often, please like, share, subscribe. This video will be relatively quick. I just want to talk about or just give notice that the registration deadline has been extended. The registration deadline, like I said before, was in October, but that deadline has been extended all the way out to February. The voting itself takes place in April. You can see that's somewhat of a big deal in regards to a change. I mean, for all intents and purposes, you're going from, 6 months to 2? So from the standpoint of a policy objective, it's a win, I suppose. The law signed Thursday will end the October 11th deadline and allow voters to register by February 14th to make changes to the party enrollment. New York's presidential primary is scheduled for April 28th. So let me repeat. The October deadline that was scheduled for October 11th has been now pushed to February 14th, essentially Valentine's Day. So if you are in New York and you are an independent and you, for the most part, want to get into the primary in order to vote for Sanders because New York is a big state and an important state from the standpoint of the primary, you have until February 14th. You have until Valentine's Day. Don't wait until Valentine's Day if Sanders is on the ballot. Get your registration sooner. Like I said, they've been dumping hundreds of thousands of people off the rolls in 2016. And something squirrely was taking place even in the elections early on, meaning they haven't fixed their glitches and fixed their issues. But that's a separate issue. This story is very specific. The deadline to register to vote in the Democratic primary has been moved from October 11th to February 14th, starting today. Meaning Cuomo signed the bill today. He signed the bill on Thursday, making it February 14th. It initially was October 11th. I know I'm nailing this in, but I want to make sure people understand it. It was originally October 11th. It has been now changed to Valentine's Day, February 14th. The day to vote in the New York presidential primary is April 28th. That means people will have roughly 2 to 3 months. March, April. Yeah, they will have roughly 2 months, a little bit less. Is that right? A little bit less? April. Yeah. A little bit less than 2 months. So yeah, but a month and a half before the election itself take place. February 14th, Valentine's Day, is the last day to register to vote in the state of New York. That has been moved from October 11th by a bill that was signed by Cuomo today. Now, Cuomo's response to this, he says, while the federal administration continues to look for new ways to disenfranchise voters across the country, in New York we are making monumental changes to break down more barriers to the ballot box and encourage more people to exercise this fundamental right. This measure will make it easier for New Yorkers who have their voices heard in presidential, congressional, and state primaries, which builds upon many reforms we've made to strengthen New York's election system and increase voter access across decrease voter access once and for all. Now, personally, I would go a little bit further, and I would say that if a person wanted to change their political affiliation on the spot, on the primary, like some of the other states do, I think that should be perfectly fine. However, I do, at the very least, accept this is better. I accept that this is better. So, not perfect? Nope. A little bit better than they had it before? Absolutely. October 11th was the old deadline, and that deadline tripped up a lot of lefties because many of those lefties decided they wanted to vote for Sanders and found that they couldn't do it. And many of those lefties who were even registered found that they couldn't do it because their name was thrown off the rolls. This has been moved to Valentine's Day, February 14th. Voting for New York is April 28th. Like, share, subscribe. I'll be back momentarily. This is just a small one. I just wanted to give an update. I was going to do a story beforehand saying that Cuomo needed to sign that bill, and I did a video once before making the point that if you need to vote, or if you want to vote in New York, you need to get your registration filled out sooner rather than later. This bill from Cuomo does push that back a bit, so fair enough. But nevertheless, New York is an important state, and if you're a Sanders supporter, get registered. Like, share, subscribe.